Hi guys, I'm Darren, and in this video we're going to be crashing the Baby AR Pro. Maybe. So yeah, in this video we're going to be flying the Baby AR Pro, and you know, things happen, so I thought what we'll do before we actually fly is take a look at what I've done with the build and my thoughts about that process. So here we have the Baby AR Pro, and it is fully built, ready to go. Now, I've not got a battery in here, but I've got this balancing with a 3S lithium ion pack. This is an 18650 size pack, and with everything laid out like this, it just balances on the CG spots. If you're using a lighter battery, you may have trouble. You can see I've had to move everything pretty far forwards. In fact, there's not really much behind the spar at all, only really the ESC and the motor. So this plane is a little bit of a pain for getting the CG right. First, the good things. When this comes out the box, I've used these on a servo test round with iNav, and the servos look like they're pretty much set out the box, or at least they were for me. This wasn't sent to me specially from SonicModell. This was actually provided by Banggood. So this is a kit as you would buy it from the store. Now the elevons are actually up a little bit, they've moved, but it looks like the reflex was about right. So it looks like when they installed these, they actually centered them and adjusted the linkages so that they were about right. So that's a good positive thing. The winglets on here glued on are pretty solid, so I think they all will survive pretty well. And yeah, the build process was pretty painless. In the nose, I have a Walk Snail nano camera, and the reason I have that is because it's something that I had spare. I wanted to go the HD route with this, so the nano was what I had available. And if you can see in the back, I've had to glue it in place, but I also used the little frame that comes with this to make it more like a micro size camera. What you may notice is that there's really nothing around that for airflow at all. Also, I had to cut away some of the foam where you can see those two bits coming out the side, so that it would come far enough forward to avoid seeing a ring of foam. So as far as the camera goes, it's pretty light really. It's a nano camera, it's not a micro camera. So the space here is for a micro size camera. They would usually be a bit heavier, which probably would help slightly with CG. Inside this bay, I'm using a Maiden F765 WSE flight controller. The reason I'm using this is because it's the lightest flight controller that I had spare, pure and simple. The SpeedyBee F405 weighed, I believe it was 10 grams more than this. It may have been 20, I can't actually remember, but this one was definitely lighter by a substantial amount. And seeing as I've had to move it far forward, anything heavier would actually not be helpful, because the CG is pretty much where these antennas are. So these are rear of CG. Any extra weight is going to add to tail weight. So having lightness here was important. Likewise, it would have been better if this was like a 1S board, but again, this is what I had. So again, this is as far forward as I could get it. The battery pack is right in that gap. Rather than just using the antennas that came with it, which would have been coming out the back and having to stick up somewhere on the little poles, I went with these. These are TrueRC OCP antennas. This one's actually got a 200mm long feed wire, so I could get this wrapped all the way around and buried in the foam. So it's actually quite nice and clean when you look at it. There's not a lot of disruption to the airflow, and I should still get a pretty decent signal out of each side. So those antennas, again, I put forward for balancing. I probably could have still come a little bit further forward, but I think I'm happy with this. With regards to the receiver and GPS, my receiver is actually in this bay here. So you can see it's behind CG, and the spar runs through here. So actually it is behind the spar, but when I measured it out, it's right on the front edge. It is actually a bit further forward than it would have been if I'd put it here. So the main reason, other than I do like separation, for putting the receiver antenna here is to get it forward. It is right in this corner here at the front edge. Likewise, GPS, you can see the connector for it is right in this front corner in this wing. So actually, laterally, it should balance pretty nicely. It's a little bit heavier towards the GPS, but There we go, it's pretty decent. I'm running 2.4 Express LRS in this, mainly because of having a light system. Having a bigger antenna in here would not have helped. The GPS is the Walksnail M10, which again is something that I've not used before, so it will be a nice test bed for that. So that's the setup. One thing of note, the reason that I was interested in this model is because the wings were removable. Unfortunately, having to put everything here means that the screws that you use to take the wings off are buried. So getting it apart is not going to be so easy. It's probably still doable. Certainly the other side will be harder. I've chosen the easiest side. So yeah, the screw is undone. So yeah, the wing will be removable. I've put both of the GPS and the RX on connectors so they could be removed. Same with the servos. So yeah, it is still removable, but it's not so easy as it would have been without a load of components there. But it's something you'll have to keep in mind. If you do want the wings to be removable, you'll want a, well, I've got about a 5mm gap this side, and I think I could probably still get it apart. Actually, it might be handy because it will retain the screws, so there may be a positive about that after all. Right, so as far as the flight controller goes, I'm running iNav 6.1.1, the latest version. Pretty much a standard setup. All I needed to do for the elevons was reverse output number 3. So yeah, there's nothing really spectacular about this. Of course, if you're doing auto launch, make sure that when you test the throttle level, it gives you enough push. I believe I'm using about 80 or 90% throttle for the auto launch. We'll see how that goes. As far as feed forward goes, the standard default settings actually seemed pretty decent for this. It was about 80 to 90% throw compared to manual. So there's very little work being done. Most of it's just been setting up the OSD and sort of standard stuff. So a very straightforward install. And all we've got left to do now is see how this thing flies. Right, so finally I was actually able to get out and see how this thing flies. It took me ages because of weather, closures at the flying site, more weather, and yeah, it just got delayed a lot, which was really frustrating because it's been built for ages. But before we get into the proper maiden flight, I just want to sort of visit one area, and that is my first go at a maiden. Why? Because I made a mistake, and that cost me a motor, and we'll see what happens in this video. So this first bit, we're just in the HD footage from the walks now. Here's the throw, and you can see the problem, it descends. And this is because I'd messed up on the board pitch alignment. For some reason, it was going down at 22 degrees when the aircraft was only trying to go up at like 18 or 20 degrees. So second flight, this auto launch goes much better. This is after correcting the board pitch alignment. I'll just set it back to 0. And yep, let's go for a throw. And everything is looking good so far. It's climbing nicely. Auto throttle is saying 100% even though it's set to 90. I think that's just an issue with the display. But you can see the amps have completely gone. The motor is not providing any power. Once we'd retrieved the aircraft, I did try testing out the motor, gave it a little bit of a spin, and it just completely smoked. So the ESC was actually really to blame for this because that didn't work either. So as a result of that incident, I had to get a new motor and a new ESC. So these aren't stock, but I tried to get as close to stock as possible. So this is a T-Motor 1507, and it's still 3800 kV. So this was the closest size and closest kV motor I could actually find. I couldn't actually find the original motor anywhere, so that was the best that I could do. But from the first throw, I could tell you that the original motor has plenty of power. So my concerns about this being undersized, not really anything I should have worried about. It actually was fine. And with this motor, same kV, but a little bit bigger can, so probably a bit more torque through your windings. It absolutely screams. Potentially, if you wanted even more efficiency, you could maybe go down a lower kV and get a slightly bigger prop, and that might give you slightly better efficiency, but this thing's got bags of power. The ESC, again, I was limited on what I could get. This is a Holybro Teco 45 amp. well overkill for this motor. Most of the time you're cruising at about 3 or 4 amps, so it really doesn't need to be this size, but it was the closest that I could get. But other than that, everything has stayed the same as earlier in the video. So again, the walk snail, the receiver, the GPS, which again was the walk snail GPS, had no problems with that. So how about we stop looking at this and actually look at the real Maiden now. Right, so let's get this Maiden underway. I've left the sound on for the minute so you can hear how windy it is. It was about sort of 15 miles an hour average, gusting to about 20-25 miles an hour. So a fair amount of wind. But yeah, auto launch, you can see this thing goes straight up. Again, this was the same settings, 90% throttle, so it's scaling while you're seeing a higher throttle level. But yeah, we get up nice and easily. You can see it's a bit bouncy because of the wind, but so far so good, no problems whatsoever. What I do next is, over the next few minutes, perform a basic auto tune. I won't show it in the video because the weather is not great for this, so I'll do a video on auto tune when it's nice and calm and go through that process with you. But let's skip ahead and get some more interesting footage going on. Auto tune's done, so I'm still in acro. It doesn't look like it's any different because the PIDs don't change. With auto tune, it's only the rates and feed forward, so we're still getting the bounce because of the turbulence off the trees and everything, but the roll and pitch rates are much improved now, and this thing flies really nicely. You can see I've literally just come out of auto tune. I'm already happy to skim the ground with this thing, even in those wind conditions. So yeah, you can see it's nice and agile. It can go through gaps. You can have a lot of fun with this plane, and it will also be pretty efficient. Now I'm just looking on my OSD and I didn't have amp draw, but now I do. So we're at about 44% throttle and about 4 amps. Yeah, going from 3 or low 3s to 4 amps depending on what we're doing with the wind and where we're flying. Yet this thing is behaving very nicely indeed, which brings me on to one thing that's really interesting about this plane. Now at this point I'm in manual, so the flight controller's really not doing a lot at all. It's just passing through the mixer, expo, and a few very basic things. It's doing no stabilization at all. Unfortunately, this OSD, I don't have my throttle on it, which is unfortunate because at this point here I'm very low on the throttle. And at this point here, I'm at 0 throttle. I've got no forward power whatsoever. This thing is just staying here because of the wind, and it's just hovering basically. If anything, it will start going backwards soon because it's just staying there. And you can see even in manual mode, this thing is not stalling whatsoever. We've got about 20 miles an hour airspeed. The ground speed is, you can see it's like around 4 to 10. There's not a lot going on. It's very stable. This thing will be perfect for beginners. You saw it launch is easy. It's got a very good stall handling, as in it doesn't seem to want to stall whatsoever. And yeah, it's just fantastic. It flies very nicely. So if you're a beginner, this is a great little plane to get started with. The biggest problem will be the build, because you do need to work out the CG and everything for that. That's the biggest problem. But as far as the flying goes, this thing is awesome. So yeah, I don't really know what else I can say about this plane without just sounding like a fanboy, because honestly, this thing flies great. My Mini AR Pro is getting retired. This thing is just going to be in the flight bag every time I go flying. You can see again, still in manual mode, 0 throttle, and I'm just staying there. I really wish I'd put the throttle on the OSD, because that would have just proved it, but I am at 100% 0 throttle here. It's all the way down. This thing is just floating. But yeah, if you're looking for a small plane, this is one that really should be on the checkout list. It's such a fantastic flyer. You will have no problems with it whatsoever. No matter what level you're at, this is a great choice. And to be honest, for small planes, it's probably at the top of my recommended list right now. Nano Goblin's up there too. There's a few others that I like, but this is fantastic. I just thought I'd show a little return to home example. Once you've done the auto tune, it works fine, but I figure I'd just do one just to show that it's all good. So you can see it's in RTH now. It's adjusting the altitude to my return to home altitude, and it's en route to home. You can see it's flying absolutely fine. I'm now back in acro, so it didn't really last long, but it was on the way back. Yeah, even in these bad conditions, this thing flies really nicely and pretty predictably. So fantastic little plane. Finally, let's just show the landing. I'm in manual at the moment, but I think I do switch into acro just because of the wind. You can see I started quite high up, about 370 feet. I'm coming in pretty slowly with ground speed 22 miles an hour, airspeed 37. So it's a pretty slow approach. You can do this quite easily. You can see the battery is down to 2.8 volts. This is a 3S lithium ion pack. We've had about 34.5 minutes of flight. And yeah, it goes down nice and easily. This was just a fun flight. There was not any concerns about preserving battery or anything like that. Yet this was just having fun and seeing how it flew. So I'm sure if you wanted long time, you can get more out of a battery. Okay, so it's conclusion time, and how am I going to wrap this up? Now, I really don't want to sound like a fanboy or that I'm plugging stuff, but to be honest, this plane is brilliant. It wipes the floor with the original Mini AR, so my one is actually going to get retired and this will be taking its place. There are a few little things that I should mention. Again, the holes in the wing I don't think is a good idea, so that's why I've put this tape on to close the gaps, and that will probably improve efficiency a little bit. The CG is quite a narrow area, so you do have to plan your components where you're going to put things to hit that CG. So if you're someone who's looking for power and is going to put a bigger motor on it, then you really do need to think about the weight up front when you're doing that. One thing that I'm considering is changing out the 18650 pack for a 21700 pack. It's got plenty for cruising on 3S. It doesn't really need 4S. If you're going for something faster, then maybe 4S. But with the amount of space available and given the CG situation, I think a 3S 21700 using something like the Samsung 50S, so you'll get 5000 milliamp hours, would be a really nice setup for this. And then you've got a bit more play to move components backwards slightly in the bay. The balance will be a bit easier to achieve. So that's my main thoughts with regards to that. The only other thing I'll bring up is you may need to trim this hole for the camera. I'm gonna either need to cut foam or change to a different camera. It's just not quite far enough forwards. You probably saw in the video there's a black ring of foam around the camera lens. You can get rid of that by just cutting it, but I'm unsure if I'm going to keep this VTX in here yet. I may try and put the smaller, lighter VTX in there. Maybe I'll keep this camera. They're all compatible and it'll save me a job. So I may just take some of that foam away. But yeah, other than that, this thing is awesome. If you're looking for a small, lightweight plane, even if you're a beginner, this is fine for a beginner. As we discussed in the video, this thing doesn't want to stall. I know I had quite a windy day, but I was facing into wind, no throttle whatsoever, full up elevator, and it was just staying there. And I probably could have kept it there as long as I wanted. It just did not want to stall at all. It's a great plane if you're just getting started. Launches easily. You would have seen the launch with, that was just using iNav auto launch straight off the bat, and it just rocketed straight up into the sky. So I can really tune down the amount of throttle needed for that launch. It doesn't need what it's got in there at the moment. But yeah, overall it is a fantastic plane. I still think the P&P is a little bit too expensive compared to how much the Mini AR wing cost, but it is a good plane. So if you're looking for a plane this sort of size, it's definitely one to take into consideration. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Fly your models like you stole them. I'll see you on the next one.